Okay, let's have a look at an example project. After looking at this project, you should have stronger JavaScript skills. These are all the different functions and code which we're going to use in this project. And the basic idea is to put together a lot of the techniques and code that we've seen before. And to do that, we'll build a guessing game. So let's play the game. Okay, so we are playing the game. And you can see it says, I'm thinking of a number in the range 1 to 100. What is the number? Okay, so you have to think what number the computer is thinking of. Let's try, 73, something like that. And it tells you, no, the number is too large that I've said. So it's got to be smaller than 73. Press OK, I get another chance. I'm thinking of a number in the range 1 to 100. What is the number? It must be less than 73. Okay, let's try 44. And the number is too large. Okay, it's less than 44. Now, of course, I could be a little bit more scientific than just typing in some of these numbers, like I could do 50 and 25. But let's pretend that we are not thinking in a logical way. Let's say I do 44. Let's do a lower number. Let's say 11, something like that. What does it say? Your number is too small. Okay, so it's somewhere between 11 and 44. All right, well, let's try maybe 30. Okay, number is still too small. So clearly it's between 30 and 44. What's the number? Let's try 40. Number is too large. Okay, so we can begin to narrow down the number. Okay, 35 is too large, so it must be between 30 and 35. Let's try 33. Number is too small. All right, then we don't have many numbers left. It should be 34. Yes, you got it. The number was 34. It took you 8 guesses to get the number. All right, that is the whole idea of the game. It's computer thinks of a number. You have to get the answer as quickly as you can in as few guesses as possible. So let's look at how we built that game. Okay, so this is what we saw when we started. We see this little window and then it lets us enter the number. And then we obviously have some intelligence, all handled by JavaScript, for processing what number we enter. So we get the idea. It thinks of a number in the range 1 to 100, including 1, including 100. And you have to guess it, and it gives you some feedback. And after several times, eventually, you can use logic and narrow down and get the right answer. So what we have is actually a flow diagram like this for handling the logic of the game. And so I'm going to go through this. Basically, first of all, we generate a random number in the computer's memory, browser memory. We store it in a variable target. Okay, so that's what the player, the person using the game, has to get. He has to get that number in target. So then you get some input from the player and you store it in another variable, guess input. And so then we look at guess input. We look at that number and then we go through and check. We have a series of checks, and if it passes all of those checks, you got it correct. Okay, but there's several situations where it could fail. So let's look at the first one. So the first one, let's look at what the person typed in. Is what the person typed in not a number? This is a number guessing game. They can't type in infinity or something like that, or I don't want to type a number. They cannot type in text. Okay, so if they type in text or something silly, then give them some feedback, enter a number, and then we loop back. Okay, what's the second test? Second test is if the input which the person typed in, it was a number, however, it was a number in the wrong range. Our game is from 1 to 100. If they entered -50 or +300, then we want to get another message, wrong range. All right, now if it passes that second test, then we go to our third test. Was the number typed in by the player, was it bigger than the number being thought of by the computer? If it was, then little message, too high, your number is too high, and then we loop back again. And then our fourth test, if the number entered by the player was smaller than the target number. Then another message, too low. Back we go, looping again until we have a number entered by the user which passes all of those four tests. If it passes all of those four tests, then they are correct. They have finished. They have got the answer. So that is the flow diagram which we've implemented in JavaScript. So let's have a look. So first of all, the HTML part. Well, as you can see, there's really no HTML. It's really just those little alert boxes and prompts, those little windows. So there's very little HTML. And so we, just for this example, we put the HTML in a separate file like this. And then we just linked to the main JavaScript like this. So the browser will bring in the JavaScript from another file. The only clever bit is when the web page loads, then we start one of those functions which is in that other file, okay? But mostly there's no HTML. You could add HTML if you want to and do some, text and things, but we have just done a simple version of the game. Okay, so we've looked at those. Web page loads, trigger the first main piece of code, the main function, and that is actually in a separate file. So if we look at that file, we'll see these components, and we're going to look at it in a minute. So we've got global variables, and we've got actually two functions, okay? These two functions work together to play the game. So this is the first function, do game. What does it do? Generates a random number in a particular range, and then has a while loop which repeats until the player gets the right answer, okay? So that's the main game function. We'll see it in a minute. And then here we've got another function, check guess. The user does a guess inside the while loop, and then we have to check, is it correct? Remember, we have four tests. So that is in another function, check guess. And so this function, the main game loop, that calls this function to check what the person has typed in and also give some feedback. So these two functions are working together. So let's have a look at those functions and we'll go through those different elements. So let's have a look. So here we have the code, and at the top we have our global variables which have been created. Some of them are given initial values like this. The game has not finished, so we put finished into that variable. And we have to remember how many times the player has played the game in a loop. So we remember it with this variable, and I just put 0 in there at the start. This program I'm using is Notepad++, which is on a PC, but you can use any kind of editor. So here is our first game function. This is the main game function, do game. So what happens? Well, we just explained it a few seconds ago, but here's the actual code. So the first one is generate a random number from, so far this would be from 0 to 99.99999. That's what this particular line of code does. We've seen this before. And then we could throw away the decimal place. So now it would be 0 to 99 without a decimal place. We've seen that before. And finally, let's add 1. And that means the range is going to be 1 to 100, including 1, including 100. That is the target number the player has to guess. All right, so after that, we go into our main loop. So our main loop says, all right, keep repeating while we have not finished. Remember, this little exclamation mark is JavaScript way of saying not. While we have not finished, then we have our loop, okay? Our loop will finish when second function returns true. That second function is responsible for checking whether the user has got a correct result. When the user enters a correct result, true comes back to here, and the entire loop finishes and doesn't get executed anymore. What's inside the loop? Well, we've got a little message here, and that's what gets shown to the player. I'm thinking of a number in the range 1 to 100. What is the number? and that is using the little prompt window, and whatever they type in goes to a variable. And remember, when you use prompt, it returns text. So we have to convert our text into integer. So we take the text, convert it into integer. That's what parse int means. It means process the text and convert it to an integer number, a number without a decimal place, and then put the result here. Now we're keeping track of how many times the person guesses. So we keep track of it in here, and that variable increases by 1 each loop. Then another function, as I mentioned, will check whether or not the correct answer has been entered. And so we repeat this loop until the correct answer has been entered. Now let's look at that function, the second function. Here it is. And it's really the same as the loop, which we just showed, where we do 4 checks. So here's the first check. Is the input entered by the player not a number? NAM, you can see there's capital N, capital N. You have to do it exactly like that. Is it not a number? Okay. So for example, if I type in big or small or happy or something like that, then this function will say, no, that is not a number, and it will return true. So if the user types in something which is not a number, we show an appropriate message, and then we return false. That means the user has failed to check correctly. Return immediately stops the entire function. There's nothing else is executed. That will stop the function right there. Then it goes back to the main loop. All right, so second check, is it in the correct range? So there's 2 tests here, really. If the guess entered by the person is negative or 0, or the guess entered by the person is bigger than 100, it is out of range. So let's show a message. No, it must be in the correct range, like 1 to 100. And that is another fail situation. They have failed to guess the answer correctly. So we do return false. And that will immediately stop this function, check guess. Third check. Okay, here it is, third check. If the number entered by the user is bigger than the actual number in the computer's memory, all right, your number is too large, and then it's still a failure. So we stop the function and we return false, indicating still a failure to guess the answer. This one, the final check. If the input entered by the player is smaller than the target, all right, then your number's too small. And again, you have failed to guess the answer. Stop the function and return false to the main game loop. All right, now if we got this far, then we're happy because we have actually got the correct answer. We don't even have to do an if statement to check it. If it got through all the other checks, then it must be the correct answer. So show a message, you got it, very good, the answer was this. And also we could show how many times they typed in a number, just for fun, really. And this is a success situation, so we return true. Okay, that goes back to the main game loop. Let's check our main game loop. Here it is, and that goes back here. The trues or the falses, they come back to this variable, and then they get checked in the next iteration of the while loop. Okay, so let's play the game once again, just to remind ourselves what's going on. So here we are once again. I'm thinking of a number. This will be a different random number to before. What is the number? Well, I suppose we could be very logical and we could try to divide the possible numbers into 2. 50 is the number. Okay, it's too small. All right. Well, what is the number? Let's try 75. Okay. Well, it's too large. All right, between 50 and 75. Now let's try some of the other tests we saw. Let's try what happens if I type in something which is not a number and a word is not a number. Okay, infinity is not a number. Okay, So what happens? You have not entered a number. Please enter a number in the range 1 to 100. Okay, same for something else like, no, you have not entered a number. It keeps repeating that if I enter in some kind of numbers. Even if I use this kind of idea, 9, if I write it with English, it also will be rejected. It's not a number as far as JavaScript is concerned. So where are we? Back to our game. What about outside the range? Let's do that check as well. What about if I say -4? Then it says, no, please enter an integer in the range 1 to 100. All right, let's try, 102. Okay, again, same message. Please enter an integer in 1 to 100 range. All right, so back to playing the game. So we've got some number. Let's try 60, and it's too small. All right, and then I think it was 75 was the highest so far. So let's do, 67, and then it's too small. All right, let's try 72 or something. It's too large. Let's try 70. It's too large. So let's try, 69, whatever. You got it. The number was 69. It took you 12 guesses to get the number, which is not very good. Okay. All right, so that is our little game that we've put together. You can play it on the website. We've discussed all the different elements, so that is a good place to finish right there.